11,
Oh,
11,
and most of
11,
these
and
amps go up to 10.
Exactly.
Does that mean it's louder?
Well, it's one louder, isn't it?
The funniest movie ever made about rock and roll, says David Anson of Newsweek.
Why don't you just make 10 louder and make 10 be the top number and make that a little louder?
Don't miss it. One of the funniest movies ever, says Stephen Shaffer of Us Magazine.
He's going to 11.
This is Spinal Tap, rated R. Coming soon to a theater near you.
Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is a review of the 1984 mockumentary, This is Spinal Tap. And this is one of my favorite films, and one of the finest examples of a mockumentary. This movie is hilarious, it's entertaining, and it was such a authentic production on so many levels that you had bands and artists fooled. They thought that this was a real documentary. And you even had band members who were feeling jealous that there was this movie that was focusing on this band called Spinal Tap, and they had never heard of this band before. So they were all like, why did they choose that band? Like, who the fuck is Spinal Tap? And I think that really is a big reason why the film has gotten such a big cult following over the years, and why it has so much respect among artists and band members and fans of heavy metal, because of the fact that it does have this authenticity. And it's very relatable to a lot of people within the industry. And not only that, it's just funny as hell. It's such a hilarious film. Now, much like other classic comedies, it's not a constant gut buster. You're not going to be laughing your ass off every second or every minute of the running time, but that's not really the case with comedies anyway. A successful comedy is not really successful because you're just laughing all the time. A successful comedy works because it's clever, it's creative, it's well written. Or in this case, well improvised, because pretty much all of the comedy, all of the memorable lines of dialogue, like it goes to 11, all of that was improvised by the cast. And that's impressive. That's honestly quite amazing that they were all able to pull off such a feat, along with director Rob Reiner, who allowed them to have that kind of freedom, especially for three cast members in Christopher Guest, Harry Shearer, and Michael McKean that weren't really household names at the time. They weren't really on the tip of that many people's tongues. So to give those three relative unknowns that much freedom creatively, that was putting a lot of faith in what really was not necessarily the most reliable situation. But because Rob Reiner and company took that risk, that's why the film is as special as it is. Because you're not going to have Spinal Tap without those three. And they had messed around and played with this concept and Spinal Tap, I think, in a sketch on some short-lived comedy show at one point, but it wasn't fully fleshed out. And this is really where they were able to create the juggernaut that is Spinal Tap. So the film is directed by Rob Reiner, and I think he did a remarkable job directing this film in terms of making it look and feel like a real down and dirty, cheap documentary about the life and trials and tribulations of a rock band while they are on tour. I really feel he nailed the aesthetic And he had a good sense of comedic timing, as well as of a sense of knowing when to trim things down, knowing when to cut things out. He allowed his cast to have a lot of freedom, but he also was not afraid to cut things out that he didn't feel were really that funny or didn't work, which really helped the film in terms of its pacing and also enabled the movie to have all the choice cuts of comedy instead of just having a random mix of different comedic bits that really were more than likely going to be more misses than hits because of the fact that there's just too much going on. And I feel that a lot of modern comedy filmmakers and writers can take a lot of inspiration and also notes from this film in terms of how to do this kind of Lionel-rama comedy the right way. Because you see so many filmmakers like Paul Feig or others who just let the joke go on too long to the point where it's beaten to death, or they just let the cast just improv and improv and improv and just do lines and lines and lines, and sometimes not even have an idea of the context provided to the audience. It's just in jokes among friends or just things that don't really work that well. But they're still in the film because these filmmakers don't really have the guts or they don't really want to tell their stars no. And when it comes to This Is Spinal Tap, I don't feel that was the case. And I also feel that it was a legitimate collaboration between Reiner and his cast. I think they really got along well. And as a result, it really was lightning in a bottle when it comes to what they were able to get out of one another. It also helps that Reiner had a background in comedy, he had a background in this kind of stuff. He'd been working on a lot of things even prior to this. He was well known for being a part of the cast on All in the Family. So Rob Reiner was not someone who was a complete novice to what makes comedy work and how to work with other comedians and other people that think in a similar way as he did when it comes to comedy. And another thing that I want to point out in terms of how the film is able to maintain this authenticity is the cinematography by Peter Smokler. Now, Peter Smokler at this time was already a well-established DP. He had done a lot of documentaries. So they got a guy to do the film who knows the ins and outs of what a documentary should look like. And his collaboration with Rob Reiner was every bit as important as Rob's collaborations with his cast, because it just once again solidified the authenticity of this film. And the authentic look and feel of it makes it even more hilarious when you have the absurd moments like Stonehenge, when you have the ridiculous sequences or series of events that occur throughout the film, when you have Harry Shearer stuck in the pod and scenes like Nigel doing a guitar solo while he's flat on his back and he's stuck and he can't get up. This is the kind of stuff that's so much more funny and so much more hilarious because of how it's shot in a way that's serious, as if it's meant to be a legitimate production and not a parody, not some zany, goofy, uh, off the wall movie. Now, the film has writers, Christopher Guest, Michael McKean, Harry Shearer, and Rob Reiner. But like I said earlier, each scene was just set up in a way for the cast to improvise. So there was just a little blueprint for each sequence, and they would just roll the cameras and see what happens. So a lot of the dialogue and a lot of the other sequences were completely improvised. And the spontaneity of that is a big part of why it's such a uproarious film to watch. And the fact that it was willing to be silly. Like the whole Stonehenge bit is silly as hell, but it is fucking hilarious. I crack up and I just laugh my ass off every time I see the Stonehenge scene. And just thinking about it is starting to crack me up, especially when it all starts. When the little foam Stonehenge prop starts falling down. Comedy gold. Hilarious. Just looking up at this thing like, what the fuck? And then it just escalates. It's lowered all the way down onto the stage, and there's little people that are dancing around it, and they're almost trampling over the thing because they're that much larger than it is. And then after that, you have the whole thing where David just blows up and gets pissed off.
I do not, for one, think that the problem was that the band was down. I think that the problem may have been that there was a Stonehenge monument on the stage that was in danger of being crushed by a dwarf. All right? That tended to understate the hugeness of the object.
And it's just absolutely hilarious. And then other stuff. I mean, I mentioned it earlier, but it should be mentioned again because it's another really funny scene when Harry Shearer's character, I think he's the bass player, Derek Smalls, he gets stuck in this pod while they're trying to do this performance and he can't get out. And by the time they get him out, the song's pretty much almost over. So then he has to go in and get back in place for the end of the bit. And just the whole image of him stuck in there while everyone else is doing the song and he's still trying to play his parts. Just hilarious. Comedy gold. And what makes it even funnier is that there are real life instances that something like that has actually occurred. The band U2, they had this tour. I forgot what the name of the album they were promoting at the time was, but they did this tour, I believe, in like the late 90s or early 2000s sometime. And one of the big deals of the tour is that they were doing a lot of elaborate sets. And one of the set pieces they were using is this giant lemon. Well, during one of the concerts, U2 got trapped in the giant lemon. So they had a Spinal Tap moment. For real. I mean, you just can't make that shit up. I mean, it's so funny that they actually had a Spinal Tap moment on a large scale in front of all of these people, just waiting for U2, and they're trapped in this fucking lemon. Um, just great. And other stuff too, like when speaking of trapped, when they're trapped backstage and they can't find the entrance to the stage, they keep going around in circles, and that was really a lot of fun as well. And even other things like just dialogue and banter between the characters, or Nigel's rant on sandwiches, the whole thing with turning the speakers up to 11, um, how they had this history of drummers that had died mysteriously or unexpectedly. There's this one drummer that he didn't die of choking on his own vomit. He choked on someone else's vomit. This other guy, he just exploded on stage. He just spontaneously combusted. And even stuff like just reviews of their albums. The whole thing where Marty, he's listing off reviews to the band. He's like, well, how about this one? There was just this review here that had only 2 words when it comes to the review. of your album Shark Sandwich. Shit sandwich. And that was, there's just a lot to really like about this film when it comes to its comedy, when it comes to the way that it's set up, and how these three guys work off of one another, and how well Rob was able to capture their distinct personalities and their energy, and they're not the only talented comedians in the cast. I mean, you've also got early appearances by Dana Carvey and Billy Crystal, who have a bit roles as these mimes who are also uh, doing a food service where they play these mime waiters who are a part of this business where they cater to parties as mimes. And yeah, it was just really a lot of fun to see those two in an early role. Got Fran Drescher, who plays someone who works for the record company. He plays Bobby Fleckman. Ed Begley Jr. plays one of their earlier drummers from back in the day named Stumpy. Bruno Kirby plays a limo driver. And Paul Shaffer, he plays the incompetent promoter Artie Fufkin. Paul Shaffer was well known as a pretty popular and well-respected musician in his own right. He worked with SNL as well as other late-night shows. And Patrick Macnee, he played Sir Dennis Eaton Hogg, who was the head of the record company. So yeah, really talented cast. And you definitely do buy that Michael McKean, Christopher Guest, Harry Shearer, you bought that these three were longtime friends, longtime band members. And on top of that, they actually had chops. They could actually play. They even did an album called Break Like the Wind in the early 90s. And they did a tour. Spinal Tap actually can play. They're not one of those fake bands that can just lip sync. Like, they can actually sing. They can actually play guitar. And they even did music videos for songs like Hellhole, which is one of my favorites of theirs. And yeah, the songs themselves are also really not that bad. They aren't lazy. They aren't just rushed in terms of their nature. They are actually some pretty catchy, well put together songs. Hellhole, the Stonehenge song, Big Bottom. Big Bottom, Big Bottom. Talking about bum cakes, my girl's got 'em. Big Bottom, you're driving me out of my mind. I can't get away from this behind. I don't think I got the melody completely right there, but you get what I mean. A lot of them are very tongue-in-cheek in terms of the lyrics. There's another one where it's like it's a rock and roll song, but it has some really silly lyrics like "You put the duty in my duty" or something like that. Yeah, because it's like a heavy duty rock and roll. You put the duty in my soul, heavy duty rock and roll. um, and the screenplay, even though a lot of it's just a collection of bits, it does a really good job skewering the manufactured personas of bands and the fabrication of their personality. and really does a good job just making fun of the entire industry.
It's pretty.
Yeah, I like it. Just been fooling about with it for a few months now. Very delicate.
It's a bit of a departure from the kind of thing you normally play.
Yeah, well, it's part of a trilogy, really, a musical trilogy that I'm doing in D minor, which I always find is really the saddest of all keys, really. I don't know why, but it makes people weep instantly to play a... It's a horn part.
It's very pretty.
You know, just simple lines intertwining. You know, very much like I'm really influenced by Mozart and Bach, and it's sort of in between those. Really, it's like a Mach piece, really.
What do you call this?
Well, this piece is called Lick My Love Pump.
And as a whole, it's just a really enjoyable, hilarious film that it really does provide the same feeling that you might get if you went to a rowdy, fun, heavy metal concert. It really does provide the same kind of vibe and overall impact. And I think a big part of that is it's such a fast-paced film. It's a really quick romp. It's 82 minutes. It never really feels like it's too long. I think the running time was perfect for this kind of film. If it was any longer, it would be tedious. It would be a bit too much. And I think that was an intentional decision by the filmmakers and everybody involved with the film. And when it comes to the music, pretty much all the music is the songs that you hear in the soundtrack. There really isn't I don't think there is any instrumental stuff. So a lot of the core of the film when it comes to its music is the performances by the three guys. Christopher Guest, Michael McKean, Harry Shearer. And like I said, they're actually pretty good songs. There are metal bands who I think have worse production values and have put together worse results than this fake joke metal band in Spinal Tap. And the film didn't really do that well upon its release. It only cost about $2 million. And it wound up making $4 million in the box office. It really did not do that great. Really, how the film became such a beloved classic was on home video. And speaking of home video, had a brilliant advertising campaign for either the home video release or something that they were trying to promote to other retailers when it comes to the theatrical release, because they made this fake advertisement that was right on the money when it comes to the kind of advertisement you would see for a greatest hits album from a band at the time. And that was such a hilarious, inspired bit of brilliance by the marketers. And that even carried over into the film's first trailer, which is Marty DeBurgi wanting to show audiences some footage from his film. This is Spinal Tap. But then instead he's showing footage of a cheese rolling competition. It's silly, it's absurd, it's out there, but it's funny. And it really did a good job grabbing the audience into wanting to know what the hell This Is Spinal Tap is. And this film has endured for many, many years. You had the characters appear on The Simpsons. You had them show up and confront Metallica at one point in a really hilarious clip that's on YouTube where they confront them about the Black Album, because there's a gag in this movie where their album Smell the Glove, they had a cover on it that was very provocative, and the record company didn't like it. So they proposed a new cover, which was just an all black cover. Didn't even have the band's logo on the front. Didn't even have a listing of the tracks on the back. There was nothing on the spine. It was just completely black. And then, of course, you had the Black Album, which Metallica did. And so there's a really funny bit where Harry Shearer, Michael McKean, and Christopher Guest, they show up in character and confront Metallica about stealing their album concept. It's like, oh, that's that Black Album. It looks very familiar. um, and they made other appearances. They did a series of advertisements for some microwavable dinners. Not, it wasn't really a dinner, but it was more like it was kind of like a hot pocket. And they did a concert for their album Break Like the Wind, and they even did a duet with Cher on that album. And there's a TV movie or TV special called Return of Spinal Tap that they did to promote the album in '92. And there's two different versions. There's one that was aired on TV, which actually had appearances by Robin Williams, as well as some other celebrities. But it was short. I think it was only like 60 minutes. And then there's an extended home video version, which was released on VHS and Laserdisc, as well as DVD. And that's the version that I saw, because I actually did check that out recently. And most of it's just band footage. It's just footage of the band playing their show for their Break Like the Wind tour. And there are some bits here and there. Like there's an interview with Martin Short. And there's a few other little things. There's one where Nigel's talking about this invention that he has of a collapsible wine glass, so that you can carry around your wine. And it's a very meh thing. And I call it a thing because it's not really a movie. It's not really a sequel. It's a concert film. And it doesn't have the same pacing. It doesn't have the same magic as This Is Spinal Tap. And I don't know if any attempt to do another film would have had the same magic, because really it was lightning in a bottle. But if you're a fan of Spinal Tap, I'd recommend checking out the return of Spinal Tap, just to see the band play live and actually provide a showcase of their genuine talents, not only as comedians but as musicians. Like they can actually rock the house when they're not playing their sappy song like the Flower People. But yeah, I don't really know what else to say about This Is Spinal Tap, except if you haven't seen this film yet, you should definitely give it a watch, especially if you're a fan of mockumentaries or heavy metal, or if it interests you. And I would say at the end of the day, it is a little bit of an acquired taste. I think some people might not find it to be that funny, but I really do love this film. I find it to be a laugh out loud hilarious movie on so many different levels. So many scenes are so funny, so hilarious. And to me, it really is. It's a classic. This Is Spinal Tap is a terrific film.
It's still a stupid
Such a
cover.
fine line between stupid and clever. Yeah,
It's just that little turnabout.